The Intergalactic Academy of New Geneva floated in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, its bioluminescent corridors humming with the chatter of 47 different species. Unlike the fantastical space stations of fiction, this facility was built into a repurposed mining asteroid, its cramped quarters and recycled air creating an atmosphere more reminiscent of a cramped university dormitory than a gleaming starship. Marcus Chun pressed his face against the small porthole of the transport shuttle, watching the Academy's docking bay approach. The walls were covered in the same industrial polymer coating used in Earth's underwater research stations, and the artificial gravity generators created the familiar 0.8G environment that reminded him of high-altitude training camps back home. First, human exchange student, muttered Vexka, a Velkari whose crystalline exoskeleton caught the light like a prism. Their body resembled a cross between a spider and a jewelry box, with joints that could rotate in impossible directions. Physical. Training will be ... interesting. The Academy's PT program was legendary for its precision. Each species had evolved specific physical capabilities. The Valkyrie's flexible silicate structure allowed for incredible contortion. The Thorgon's dense mineral composition provided immense strength, and the Zephyrian's hollow bones made them natural acrobats. The training systems used advanced biomechanical analysis to create perfectly tailored challenges. Marcus shouldered his duffel bag, the same military surplus gear his older brother had used in the Marines. The corridors reminded him of the narrow hallways in his high school. Too many students, too little space, and the constant buzz of nervous energy before a challenging class. Instructor Colnine stood in the gymnasium, their 4 arms manipulating holographic displays that showed each student's physiological profile. The Thorgon instructor looked like a walking boulder, but their movements held the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. "Today we assess the human," they announced, their voice resonating through the chamber like distant thunder. The gymnasium itself was a marvel of alien engineering, but it reminded Marcus of the adaptive training facilities used by Olympic athletes' walls that could reshape themselves, floors that could adjust density, and equipment that transformed to match the user's needs. It was high-tech, but the principle was the same as the jungle gyms he'd grown up with. 23 alien students arranged themselves in a semicircle, their various appendages twitching with nervous energy. They'd studied human physiology in theoretical classes, but seeing one in person was different. Marcus looked so ... average. Medium height, medium build, no obvious evolutionary specializations. "Begin basic assessment," Colnine commanded. The first challenge was flexibility. The course configured itself for Velkari anatomy narrow passages that required pretzel-like contortion. Vexka flowed through like liquid crystal, their body bending at angles that would snap human bones. Marcus studied the course for exactly 3 seconds, then began moving. His shoulder dislocated with a soft pop, but instead of crying out, he simply repositioned and continued. The alien students watched in horrified fascination as he systematically worked through each obstacle, his body adapting in real time to challenges that should have been impossible for his species. "Adaptive protocols engaged," he muttered, unknowingly echoing the Academy's own training philosophy. The terror began when they realized he wasn't struggling. He was learning. The gymnasium reconfigured itself with mechanical precision, walls sliding and floors reshaping to create the Thorgon strength course. Massive stone blocks materialized from the floor, their weight calibrated to challenge creatures whose bones were literally made of compressed mineral. The course resembled an ancient quarry more than a modern training facility, but the principles were identical to the strongman competitions Marcus had watched on Earth.Rokathal. A young Thorgon, built like a living statue, approached the first trial. Their species had evolved on a high-gravity world where moving stone was as natural as breathing. They gripped the first block, easily 3 tons, and lifted it with the casual ease of a human. Picking up a briefcase, Marcus watched intently, his eyes tracking not just the lift, but the subtle shifts in posture. The way Rockthul's dense legs created a stable base, the arm positioning that maximized leverage. The alien students noticed his analytical stare and exchanged nervous glances. Human turn, Cole9 announced. Marcus approached the same block. His hands were soft compared to Rockthul's mineral grip, his bones hollow calcium instead of compressed. Stone, by every logical measure, he should have been crushed. Instead, he circled the block like a predator stalking prey. His fingers traced the surface, finding natural handholds carved by the Academy's fabricators. Then he wedged his shoulders underneath, positioning his legs in a stance that would have made any powerlifter proud. The block didn't budge. The alien students relaxed slightly. Perhaps humans weren't as terrifying as they'd feared. Then Marcus adjusted his grip, shifted his stance, tried again. Still nothing, but he kept trying. Each attempt was slightly different angle, different grip, different breathing pattern. The other students watched with growing unease as Marcus treated their specialized evolutionary advantages like a puzzle to be solved. On his 7th attempt, Marcus found a tiny imperfection in the block's surface. He wedged his fingers into the crack, used his body weight as a lever, and managed to shift the stone exactly 1 inch. The gymnasium fell silent. Should have been impossible. The block was designed for creatures with 4 times his muscle density. But Marcus had found a way to make it work through pure technique and stubborn adaptation. Fascinating, Cole9 rumbled. The human demonstrates tool-use mentality applied to physical challenges. Marcus continued through the course, failing at most challenges, but improving with each attempt. He couldn't match Thorgon's strength, but he could find ways to work around it. He used momentum, leverage, and even environmental factors that other species ignored. The most disturbing moment came when he started incorporating techniques from the previous flexibility course. His shoulders, still loose from the earlier dislocations, allowed him to get better angles on the lifting challenges. He was unconsciously combining evolutionary advantages from different species. Zil-F, a Zephyrian whose hollow bones made them naturally anxious, whispered to their classmate, "It's like watching a virus adapt to different hosts." Marcus overheard, but didn't understand the comment. He was just doing what felt natural, observing, adapting, improving. Back on Earth, this was called being coachable. Here, it was beginning to look like something far more sinister. The session ended with Marcus having completed roughly 30% of the Thorgan challenges, a score that should have been impossible for his species. But more importantly, his improvement curve showed no signs of leveling off. As the students filed out, Vexka approached Cole9. "Instructor, should we be concerned about adaptive protocols in a species we don't fully understand?" Cole9's 4 arms manipulated the holographic displays, showing Marcus's performance metrics. The humans' biological readings were unlike anything in their database, not because they were extreme, but because they were constantly changing. "Tomorrow," they announced, "we test aerial maneuvers." The Zephyrian students exchanged terrified glances. Their hollow bones and natural flight adaptations were their species' greatest pride. What would happen when the adaptive human turned his attention to their evolutionary niche? The gymnasium's transformation into an aerial course was breathtaking. Floating platforms materialized at various heights, connected by energy bridges that could support the Zephyrian's lightweight frames. The ceiling opened to reveal a chamber that extended upward for nearly 50 meters, creating a 3-dimensional maze that resembled the wind canyons of the Zephyrian homeworld. Marcus stared upward, his neck craned at an angle that made several alien students wince. The course looked like something from a parkour video crossed with a rock climbing gym challenging, but not impossible for a species that had been swinging from trees for millions of years. Zilf approached the starting platform. They're hollow, bones catching the light like wind chimes. Zephyrians had evolved on a low-gravity world with dense atmosphere, making them natural gliders. They leaped from the first platform with the grace of a bird, their modified wing membranes extending to catch the artificial air currents. The other students watched in appreciation as Zilf flowed through the course like liquid silk. There, body barely seeming to touch the platforms before launching to the next. This was evolutionary specialization at its finest, a species perfectly adapted to their environmental niche. Asterisk. Marcus observed from below, his analytical gaze making the Zephyrians increasingly uncomfortable. They recognized that looked now the same focused intensity he'd shown before somehow completing impossible challenges. Human attempt, Col 9 announced. Marcus approached the first platform, which hovered 3 meters above the ground. For a Zephyrian, this was a casual hop. For a human with Earth's standard bone density, it represented a significant vertical leap. He missed the platform entirely on his first attempt. The alien students relaxed slightly. Perhaps aerial maneuvering would finally reveal human limitations. Marcus landed hard, rolled to absorb the impact, and immediately tried again. This time, he got his fingertips onto the platform edge before losing his grip. The third attempt got him halfway up before his human muscles failed him, but he kept trying by. The 10th attempt, Marcus had figured out that the platform's edge had a slight texture that provided better grip. By the 15th, he discovered that the artificial gravity fluctuated slightly, creating windows where the jump became marginally easier. By the 20th attempt, he made it onto the first platform. The gymnasium fell silent, except for the sound of Marcus's heavy breathing, another disturbing reminder of his species' inefficient oxygen processing. But he wasn't stopping. He was studying the distance to the second platform, calculating angles and trajectories like a military strategist, planning an assault. "This is wrong," Zilf whispered. "Humans can't fly. They don't have the bone structure, the muscle configuration, the neural pathways, double quotes." Marcus leaped toward the second platform. He missed, but his trajectory was better than before. He'd learned from watching Zilf's technique, unconsciously mimicking the Zephyrian's body positioning and timing. The truly terrifying moment came when Marcus started removing his jacket. The loose clothing had been interfering with his movement, and he'd noticed how the Zephyrians' natural wing membranes extended from their bodies. He couldn't grow wings, but he could modify his profile to reduce air resistance. Then he started using his arms differently. Not as wings, humans didn't have the anatomy for that, but as control surfaces for balance and direction. He'd somehow intuited the basic principles of aerial maneuvering just from observation. By the end of the class, Marcus had reached the third platform, a height that most ground-based species couldn't achieve even with proper equipment. His success rate was still abysmal by Zephyrian standards, but his improvement curve was exponential. More disturbing was how he'd started, combining techniques from all 3 courses. His flexibility training helped him contort mid-air. His strength training gave him the power for longer jumps, and his aerial experience was teaching him spatial awareness that enhanced his ground-based performance. Col 9 examined the data with growing concern. Marcus wasn't just learning individual skills. He was developing an integrated approach that drew from multiple evolutionary specializations. His species appeared to be some sort of biological Swiss Army knife, capable of adapting to any challenge. Through observation and practice. After class, the alien students gathered in small groups, their conversations hushed and worried. The human wasn't just completing their courses, he was stealing their evolutionary advantages and combining them in ways that shouldn't be possible. "What happens," Bexka asked quietly, when he masters all of our specializations? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. They were witnessing something unprecedented. A species that could adapt to any niche, acquire any skill, and integrate any advantage. In a galaxy of specialists, Marcus Chun was becoming something far more dangerous. A generalist with unlimited potential. Asterisk, the Academy's mess hall had never been quieter. Species that had coexisted peacefully for decades now sat in segregated clusters, their conversations conducted in whispers and nervous glances. The Velkari's crystalline bodies clicked anxiously against their chairs, while the Thorgons sat motionless as living statues, their mineral faces betraying unusual tension. Marcus sat alone at a corner table, mechanically eating synthesized protein that tasted like cardboard. He tried to join different groups, but conversations died whenever he approached. The isolation reminded him of being the new kid at school, except here the social dynamics were complicated by interspecies politics he didn't understand. Emergency. Faculty meeting, announced Dr. Helix 9, the Academy's Centaurian administrator. Their voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent centuries managing interspecies education. Physical training protocols require immediate review. In the faculty lounge, Instructor Cole 9 presented their findings to a room full of concerned educators. The holographic displays showed Marcus's performance metrics from all 3 training sessions, and the data was deeply unsettling. The human demonstrates unprecedented adaptive capability, Cole 9 reported. Standard species show improvement curves that plateau within predicted parameters. The human shows exponential growth across all categories. Professor Quintel, a Zephyrian academic, whose hollow bones made them naturally nervous, fluttered their wing membranes in distress. My students are requesting transfers out of physical training. They believe humans are some form of evolutionary predator. The concern wasn't entirely irrational. Throughout galactic history, species had developed specialized niches to avoid direct competition. The Velkari dominated flexibility-based challenges. The Thorgon excelled at strength, and the Zephyrians ruled aerial maneuvers. This specialization had created a stable ecosystem where each species had their unique value. Marcus represented something different, species that could potentially excel at everything. He's not trying to dominate, argued Dr. Yothka, the Academy's human behavioral specialist. Analysis of his psychological profile shows typical human curiosity and competitive drive. He's simply applying standard human learning protocols to physical challenges. That's what makes it terrifying, Quintel replied. He's not malicious, he's just being human. And being human appears to mean adapting to any challenge through observation and practice. The faculty reviewed footage from the training sessions. Marcus's technique was crude compared to species-specific specialists, but his improvement rate was unprecedented. More disturbing was how he unconsciously combined techniques from different evolutionary lineages, creating hybrid approaches that shouldn't work, but somehow did. The students are calling it predator mimicry, Cole 9 reported. They believe humans study other species to steal their evolutionary advantages. Back in the dormitories, the panic was spreading. Zilef had organized an informal meeting of concerned students, their gathering resembling a support group more than a study session. It's not natural, Vexka whispered, their crystalline body refracting light in agitated patterns. My species spent millions of years developing flexibility. He learned basic techniques in a single session. The way he watches us, added Rockthul, their stone features expressing unusual emotion, like he's cataloging our movements for future use. The students shared stories of Marcus's behavior outside of physical training. He'd been seen studying their movements during regular activities, how Zephyrians compensated for their hollow bones during mealtimes, how Thorgon navigated doorways designed for smaller species, how Velkari used their flexibility for everyday tasks. He's building a database, Zilef concluded, learning our weaknesses and advantages. The truth was both more innocent and more terrifying. Marcus was indeed observing his classmates, but not with predatory intent. He was doing what humans had always done, learning from their environment through observation and imitation. The same instinct that had allowed humanity to spread across Earth's diverse ecosystems was now operating in an interspecies educational setting. The faculty emergency meeting reached its conclusion just as the student panic was reaching critical mass. 3 species had formally requested removal from physical training, and rumors were spreading about the human threat throughout the academy. "We need to address this immediately," Dr. Helix 9 announced, "before fear destroys everything we've built here." But the question remained, how do you explain to a galaxy of specialists that humans weren't trying to replace them? They were just being human. And was that distinction meaningful if the end result was the same? Outside in the corridor, Marcus walked past the student gathering, completely oblivious to the crisis he'd created. He was too busy planning his approach to tomorrow's training session, unconsciously applying the same adaptive protocols that had made his species successful and were now threatening to tear apart the most important interspecies institution in the galaxy. Asterisk. The Academy's main auditorium hadn't seen this level of tension since the Rigelian diplomatic crisis of 2157. Every seat was filled with students, faculty, and even some visiting dignitaries who'd heard about the human situation. The air recyclers worked overtime, struggling to process the mixed atmospheric requirements of 47 different species. Marcus sat in the front row, finally beginning to understand that he was somehow at the center of the crisis. The whispered conversations, the nervous glances, the way entire groups would fall silent when he approached, it all made sense now. He was the problem. Dr. Helix 9 approached the podium with the measured pace of someone who'd spent centuries in diplomatic service. "We gathered today to address concerns about our first human exchange student and the physical training program." The crowd murmured in dozens of different languages, creating a sound like wind through alien forests. "Before we discuss solutions," Dr. Helix 9 continued, "I want to share some historical context. When the Thorgon first joined our academy, the Zephyrians were terrified. A species that could crush their hollow bones seemed like an existential threat. When the Velkari arrived, the Thorgon worried about creatures that could slip through any defense." Marcus listened with growing understanding. Each species had gone through this same fear cycle when encountering others with different evolutionary advantages. The difference, called out Vexka from the audience, is that those species had clear limitations. Thorgon are strong but slow. Zephyrians are agile but fragile. Velkari are flexible but lack power. Humans seem to adapt to everything. "That's exactly the point," Dr. Helix 9 replied. "Let me show you something." The auditorium's holographic system activated, displaying Marcus's performance data alongside historical records from other species. The comparison was striking. While Marcus had improved rapidly, his peak performance in any single category was still well below species-specific specialists. Marcus completed 30% of the Thorgon strength challenges, Dr. Helix 9 explained. Impressive for a human, but Rockthul completes 95%. Marcus reached the 3rd platform in aerial training, while Zilef routinely reaches the 15th. "But he's still learning," Zilef protested. "His improvement curve shows no plateau." "True," Dr. Helix 9 acknowledged. "But that's because human evolution favored adaptability over specialization. Marcus will never be as strong as a Thorgon, as flexible as a Velkari, or as aerial as a Zephyrian. But he can become competent at all 3. Professor Quintel raised a wing membrane. "Doesn't that make humans the ultimate generalists? capable of replacing any of us? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus stood up, his human height making him visible to the entire auditorium. May I say something? The silence was deafening. I never wanted to replace anyone, Marcus began, his voice carrying the uncertainty of someone still learning about interspecies communication. Back on Earth, I was terrible at sports. Always picked last, always struggling to keep up. When I came here and saw what you could all do, the way Vexka moves like liquid crystal, how Rockthul can lift impossible weights, how Zilith flies like poetry. I wasn't trying to steal your abilities. I was trying to learn from the best. He paused, looking around the auditorium at faces that ranged from suspicious to curious. Humans don't specialize because we're predators, he continued. We generalize because we're survivors. My species evolved on a world that kept changing, so we learned to adapt. But adaptation doesn't mean replacement. It means finding ways to contribute. Instructor Cole 9 activated another holographic display, showing integrated performance data. The human's presence has actually improved overall class performance. Students are pushing themselves harder, trying new techniques, and achieving personal bests. The data was undeniable. Marcus's presence had created a positive feedback loop. His efforts to learn from others had inspired them to excel in their own specializations. Moreover, Dr. Helix 9 added, Marcus's hybrid techniques are creating new possibilities. His combination of flexibility and strength training could benefit species with musculoskeletal injuries. His aerial techniques might help ground-based species in low-gravity environments. Vexka's crystalline body began to relax, their refractive patterns shifting to calmer configurations. So humans aren't trying to replace us, they're trying to learn from us. And in the process, Rockthul added with slow realization, they're showing us new ways to use our own abilities. The tension in the auditorium began to dissipate as understanding replaced fear. Marcus wasn't a predator or a threat, he was a student, just like all of them. His adaptive abilities weren't about domination, but about finding his place in a diverse community. Dr. Helix 9 smiled, an expression that translated across species lines. This is what the Academy was designed for, not to create uniform students, but to help each species contribute their unique strengths to our shared future. The crisis was over, but the real learning was just beginning. Marcus had shown them that adaptation wasn't about becoming everything to everyone. It was about finding ways to connect, collaborate, and contribute to something larger than any single species could achieve alone. As students filed out of the auditorium, many approached Marcus with curiosity rather than fear. They wanted to understand how his adaptive techniques worked, how they might apply human learning methods to their own challenges. The Intergalactic Academy had survived its first encounter with human adaptive protocols. But more importantly, it had learned that diversity wasn't just about different species coexisting. It was about different approaches to learning, growing, and becoming more than the sum of their parts. Marcus Chon had come to the Academy as Earth's first exchange student. He was leaving as something more valuable, a bridge between species, proof that adaptation and specialization could coexist, and evidence that sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected sources. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species and infinite possibilities. And somewhere in that endless expanse, humanity had found its niche, not as the best at any one thing, but as the species that could help others become better at everything. Asterisk.